We're live. We're here. It's good morning.
Good
Matt,
morning.
Chewman, hello.
Going on another beautiful Sunday. Let's do it.
It's nice. We both live in California, so we get to benefit from the weather.
The only good thing over here. The
Yeah,
only
well,
one of the few things. You're a
that's
good
true.
thing over here, brother. So yeah, yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
hey.
yeah. You know.
So
So
we've been I'm not on the TikTok.
no,
You're on the TikTok.
I am on it. I
How,
know, begrudgingly, but
how
it
how's it
happened.
how's it going over there on the TikTok?
Dude, the Christian community on there is unbelievable. TikTok is the perfect example of Joseph. What Satan is trying to use or intends for evil, God will turn for good. So it's awesome, man. Seeing the brothers and sisters over there that love the Lord, and there's actually good content over there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of nonsense and unbelievable garbage too, but through there is also salt. It's just like what
Yeah.
we're gonna go
Oh,
through right now. Yeah,
oh, we're gonna look at
yeah,
that.
kind of
That
weird, huh?
that's what
Nice
we
little
call a
segue.
tease.
Yeah,
Tease.
yeah.
No, I was just asking. I just was reading an article on the TikTok things, and so I was on the algorithms and how they work in different places and things like that. So I was just wondering. I'm not on the TikTok,
Yeah,
but we are both on the Instagrams, which
yeah.
I'm sure is trying to follow along in that sort of thing. And if you were looking for 15-second content, this particular show is not it.
No, it's
It's going
not.
to be much longer. But if you are here for the longer haul, welcome, welcome here. We are going to be taking a look at a story, and I put story in parentheses because it's better described as a parable. And one of my kids, when I said parable, asked if there were two bowls, and I said that's not what it is. But I couldn't
Yeah.
tell if they were being a smart aleck or if they were genuinely thought I said a pair of bowls. But that wasn't even a dad joke. That was just something
No.
they said.
Hey,
Um, but
kids are
anyway,
good for you, know. Good
yeah,
for giving you content.
that's yeah. There you go. But we are going to be taking a look at it's a parable. So a parable is defined loosely as a story with earthly elements or physical elements that tells a deeper or a spiritual meaning or a heavenly meaning, depending on how you want to bend it. So we have a story that very specifically teaches a principle. One of these days, I'm going to get to putting out a video on the difference between a fact and a principle, and so that'll be, someday you'll be able to hear more on that. But today we're gonna focus in on that particular passage. So, Matt, you want to just introduce the passage that we're looking at, and I'll bring it up on the screen. We'll start
Yep, we're
yapping.
going through Matthew chapter 5 verse 13 to 16, and it is the parable of the believers that are salt and light, and how we are supposed to operate in this world if we are a believer in Christ. For Christ is always referred to as the light of the world. So we, as little imagers of him, are supposed to also be light. So it's a great little short parable for us to take a lot of application out of. Did you want to read it, or you want me to?
Yeah, before we do that, I'll just kind of intro it a little bit more. So Matthew chapter 5. So this section here, this is Jesus teaching, and this is just one small part, just a few verses out of a larger teaching that he has. It's called the Sermon on the Mount, which I think is a silly name for it, because then every sermon that is preached could be called the sermon from the pulpit. It's just like where it was that just seems silly to me. But
Mm-hmm.
it's from the Sermon on the Mount. So here we are. It's chapter 5. This whole section is very well known. In fact, if we were to go through and read other sections, even people who don't have any connection with Christianity would recognize it. And that's one of the reasons why we're coming to this section to sort of glean a story or a parable from, because so many of these little sayings, parables, stories, accounts have really seeped into just the general culture of people, and not just in America, but all over the world. These different sayings have become they've become important for people to understand different concepts, right?
Yeah, well, this is where a lot of people that aren't non-believers per se, but they say that Jesus was a good teacher. They take that a lot of those good teachings out of here, and a lot of the good moral or good morality per se. So
Yeah, and you know what? We would agree on that point. Jesus is a really good teacher. Jesus
Yeah, the best.
teaches things. He is the best. He
Yeah,
teaches things in such a way. Think about this. He taught these things in such a way that thousands of years later, even if you don't believe in him, you use these teachings as a way for you to understand things.
yeah,
I think it's pretty amazing. So at the very least, we can say with people who would generally maybe disagree with the idea that they would like hold to religion, they can say this is a good story because it teaches a good principle, right? And
mhm,
that's why I love stories. That's why I love myth and legends and all these different things, because this is exactly what can happen is we get a good understanding of a thing, and it is able to be translated throughout cultures, and it maintains its meaning because it's a story that resonates.
absolutely.
So
Best way to learn. Best way to learn. Always the best teachers in class was always a teacher that would whatever they were teaching, it would then tell some type of story to then reaffirm that teaching or back it. And what's cool with Jesus, he always tells the story, and then if people can't understand, then he'd always tell his disciples, his inner circle, the meaning behind it, which I always love. So because a non-believer can take a lot of stuff out of these teachings, but there's more to it that then Jesus gives to his followers and his friends. So it's really cool how Jesus operates.
yeah, well, there's actually two categories, right? So he does that. And then he also says some of the time, let those who have eyes to see and ears to hear get the understanding. So there are people in the crowd who could see it and could hear it,
Hmm.
and you'd say it's for them too,
Yep.
right? So, and it's interesting because and I'm not to overly tease. I'm writing a script for a video that talks about that kind of idea of transferring in story. So eventually we'll get to that aspect too. And I only say that because we're sort of moving those things off the table so we can just focus on these verses here. So
Mhm.
did you want me to read it? I can go
Oh,
ahead and read it if you
yeah,
want.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So Matthew 5, looking at verse 13 through verse 16. It
Yep.
says, you, this is Jesus talking. That's where the quotes come from. So Jesus is the one saying this. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its flavor, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled on by people. You are the light of the world. A city located on a hill cannot be hidden. People do not light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people so that they may see your good deeds and give honor to your Father in heaven.
So good. So
There you
good.
go.
So short. So yeah.
Short and sweet, and as I like to say, it's one of those things you can put in your pocket.
Yeah.
Come
I
back
do
to it
want to
later.
I do want to highlight how unbelievably important. I mean, it's obviously salt is still really important today, but back then it was critical to life. Without salt, I mean, it would yeah, you just absolutely need it. It is a necessity. And back then it was a really high end, product. Like people, that's what area was it that was high in salt and they were rich because of it. I forgot exactly what area, but it's um it's something that who Jesus was speaking to at that time would really understand and grasp the significance of salt. Nowadays, we just see it, we put on our salt or on our chips or on our seasoning, and we just, oh, we think it tastes good, oh, we need it. But it was really critical to life back then. So the
Yeah,
comparison of light to the believer is how we are supposed to be salt to this world. Just as salt preserves meat, we preserve this world with morality, with the light of Christ. There's a lot of different symbolism you can take into it as well, because if you are a believer and you are salt to this world, and you, again, because you look at verse, I believe it's 16, where it talks about it's through your good works in Christ, that if you are performing these good works in Christ and you're being the salt to the world, that non believers will see that and they will become thirsty for understanding where that is coming from. That salt and light that you are showing will make them spiritually thirsty, ideally, to make them wonder what is going on here and then to then pursue what is going on.
yeah. The concept of salt, salt. We even have all these different sayings from some of these concepts, right? So, first of all, shout out to Trinity. I'm glad you're here. You made it here pretty early on, so I'm glad you're here. But secondarily, to that statement, which has nothing to do with it, salt is something that's so valuable that it was actually used for payment. And that's why sometimes we will say to someone, they're not worth their salt, means
Yep.
they're not performing, they're not doing something up to what they're being paid. So
It's not.
this idea of salt was very valuable, and for all those reasons that you're saying, it is a preservative. It was used to preserve food. It was used, you know, probably in this area of the Middle East, they didn't have a lot of use for taking salt and salting roads. We do that though. We have
Mhm.
more utilitarian, uses for salt, but salt is very valuable. It's just very plenteous now. We've got lots of different methods to find salt. You can mine salt. You can get it from the ocean. Those types of things. But
Mhm.
salt is used in so many different things. Right? There's like this revolution in food that happened in the 20th century where all of a sudden things could become shelf stable. It's really kind of that's where your farmers markets turned into grocery stores, when finally you could have shelves of things that would be able to be on the shelf for more than a few days before they would go bad.
Mhm.
And so some preservative methods, starting with salt and different derivatives of salt, um, it led to other things, right? It led to different preservatives and things like that, which we'd probably say are not good. Salt, however, our body actually uses and benefits from. It's something that
100%.
we actually need. If we even if we're fully hydrated, if we don't have salt, if we don't have those minerals, our body doesn't function properly. We're made to have salt as part of us. So salt is extremely important.
Mhm.
And so when Jesus is talking here and he says, "You are the salt of the earth," the the big thing for me is, especially with the second statement, it says you're the salt of the earth. He said, "But if salt loses its flavor, how can it be made salty again?" And the point is that you can't. The chemical composition of salt is such that even if it tastes salty in the beginning, if it's not actually real salt, it's not going to be effective. So if it loses its flavor, if it's no longer salty, what's interesting then is if you had something that tasted salty in the beginning, but then doesn't have all the properties of salt, it's worthless.
Yep, it's
And so
useless.
it gets chucked out. It gets thrown, and they would actually do this. They had minerals that looked like salt that weren't salt. That if they found that out, literally they would just say the only thing it's useful for is like putting out on the path,
Yep.
right? Putting out on the road, so you throw it out. But this idea of salt losing its flavor, like salt doesn't lose its flavor. So what it actually came out to is that it was never salt to begin with.
Mhm.
But the real major point here is that salt is effective. You can't add real salt to something to not have its effect. Now, you might need to add more to have that effect spread out, just volume wise. But salt is always effective. It always does its work. You can't add salt and have it not do what salt does. It's just a foregone chemical reaction. It's going to do what it does. And so this idea that you are the salt of the earth means the point being, because Jesus moves on from that to light, to also have the same point, which we'll get to in a second. But light is sort of like salt in this way, that salt, when added, always does what it's supposed to do. It always is effectual. So if we apply that to us as human beings, who are you? Some of us are struggling with that question anyway.
Mhm.
Who am I? But but the point is that if you are, like Jesus is saying, if you are the salt of the earth, wherever you are put, you're going to have an effect. What Jesus is trying to say is, because this is a small part of a larger sermon, of a bigger teaching. So this is one little bit where he says, you being added to a situation need to have an effect. It's an appeal to being active, not passive. It's an appeal to you adding to a situation or an event or a thing or a relationship. You are going to have an effect. You can't not be added to something and have an effect. If you're salt, you can't be added and not have an effect. Same way, you as an individual can't be added to a situation to not have an effect. It's a
Mhm.
really powerful principle that you are a catalyst. Later on, obviously, the discussion goes into what does that mean? Who are you? What are the things you should be doing? But the point being made here for salt is you should have an effect. And we'd say
Absolutely.
salt is beneficial, so it is a good thing. So you should have that good effect in whatever you're being brought into. So go ahead.
Absolutely. No. And then from what I was looking at, a Palestinian salt back then would be mixed with impurities, and it would lose its saltiness over time. So, from what I was looking at, so then that would lose its usefulness, like you're saying. So then it would be thrown out since it had no use. It is, it's a good application, like you're saying. Wherever you put salt, it would have a use to it, or like the idea of the light that we're going to get into. As the Christian, we are supposed to then be that in a world, that a culture that is needing that preservation, because without the salt and light of Christ shining on or being salt onto fellow non-believers, if we're not doing that, if we're not being useful for the Lord, then you see the decay around. And that's actually what you see right now in the culture that we're living in. You're seeing the decay of the culture because the saltiness of the church is kind of losing its saltiness. I'm not saying all of it per se, but as a whole, as Christendom, I would personally say my view would be that you're seeing the great apostasy, the great falling away slowly coming right now. You're seeing the church conforming to today's world standards of the culture. They're trying to compromise and they're losing their saltiness. And you're seeing that. You're seeing the loss of effect. You're seeing immorality just skyrocketing. You're seeing the scales kind of shifting. And that's because you see the salt losing its saltiness per se as a whole,
Yeah.
because obviously there's Christians, there's plenty of great brothers and sisters out there that are plenty salty, that are shining the light, but I'm just talking about Christendom as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, I go to a small church, full disclosure, I am a pastor at a church. It's small, and we'd say, one of the number one things that the churches want, how do we get bigger? But a lot of that doesn't have to do with let's be a big church. It has to do with how can we take this, how can we share this good thing that's here? I want to go back to the salt as a picture. You know, the best salt that you could have is the one that you actually presently have on your table, right? So
Yeah, the one that you're going to use.
the one you're going to use.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who go to a church, and we would say there are some really specific eternal principles that should be applied in churches. But a lot of people go to a church and they go inside and they go, I don't see any of those.
Mm-hmm.
I see something completely different. I see a road show. I see a spectacle. I see
a
fluff.
concert. Yeah.
Right. It's sort of like trying to somehow figure out the nutritional value of your cotton candy.
Yep.
If you take that cotton candy and you actually smoosh it all down to what it really is, it's like a few grains of sugar. And you're like, why?
Yeah.
So it's like,
dude, spiritually malnourished.
I can understand people going to a church thinking this is where I should be able to find this thing, and recognizing this isn't where I'm finding it. But you know where you do find it? You find it in homes. You find it in small groups of people who come together. And you know what it is? It's table salt at that point. It's what's going on at work. It's what's happening there. And you being salt for someone else who needs salt. You need to be effective in a person's life. We want to make it this thing where I can have this grand gesture, I can do this grand thing, and I can just say, there, I did my thing. Right? I don't know if you want to put it into this. I can do one incredible live stream, and that's my event for the world. That's it. Like I did the best live stream ever, and I posted it out there, and hopefully thousands or hundreds of thousands of people see it. And I did my thing. And it's like that's not the point. The point's not to do a thing and then say I'm done.
Yeah.
Salt is salt is salt. Salt is always salty. Whether it's applied or not, it's still salty. And so we need to look for going out and actually salting as much as possible. Like, be that for people. I mean, how many people need that? If you're in the chat, RC Scott, I see you. If you're in the chat, how different is that from going to a place and seeing an event and having someone who's actually effective in your life? What's the difference there? Isn't that 100% different from going to a big event for fluff and then having salt applied to your situation, to your story, having someone hear you? Isn't that that's what we need, right? That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. What's so beautiful, because when Jesus came, all his disciples thought he was going to overthrow and he was going to reign king right then and there, like the second coming of the King of David and everything. But he didn't do that. He is taking the kingdom back man by man, one by one, through his disciples and through us, his church. And people get it so confused, or not, they don't get confused, but they think church of a building, but the church is us. Like right now, you and me, right here, this is church. Obviously, there's buildings where then the church gathers, but to be salt, like you're talking about at the dinner table, talking about how your day was, what's going on in your life. That is what Jesus meant by being salt to the world, being salt to the individuals with personal relationships, with taking the kingdom back man by man to build these relationships with others, to love on them, to not show, because we are not the judge. We're not passing any condemnation on anybody. We are just sharing. We're just the messengers, um, we're just giving the message of Christ. We're showing what Christ is doing through us, which we'll get through here with the light, the idea of you don't put a light under a table. You don't cover light. You let light shine, just like a light on a city on a mountaintop. That it
Right.
is a compass for travelers, sojourners walking around trying to find their way to the truth. They see that light from a distance and they follow it. So we are supposed to be that light that then people are attracted to. And at first, they might not know what they're attracted to, but then once they get to know, it's the Holy Spirit that is inside of us, the light of Christ that they are attracted to. Another
Yeah.
little analogy I like, and it's funny because obviously you have in the scriptures, you have the children of disobedience and you have the children of light, right? You get into a whole other topic about it, but I've always said it that the light of Christ, it works one of two ways with people. It either attracts like moths to a light, or it makes cockroaches flee. Like it's one or the other. Either people are attracted to it, man, like they're a moth just coming straight to that light, or they're cockroaches. They see that light and they just scatter. Their sin gets exposed, and they love the darkness, and they go hide and find darkness where they can. So, and you can't do anything about that. You just got to keep shining that light and just hoping that more moths come instead of dispersing cockroaches.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's sort of the thing too is we I think a lot of people look at a story like this or a parable like this to say, okay, salt of the earth, got it. Light, got it. And instead of that becoming something that we think about, we chew on, we make a part of who we are, how we live, like think that way, it becomes a slogan. What are we? We're a city on a hill. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean to be a light? What does it mean to be salt? What does that really mean? Because normally it doesn't mean I can just go to an event and just be present and have that satisfy.
Hmm.
That's not the point. This is something that we have to be. And that's the other thing that Jesus highlights here too in this parable is you are the salt, you are the light. That's what you are. And like you said before, church isn't a building. Church is people. In fact, church just means the assembly, and that word's loaded. There's a lot of understanding that should be as a part of that word. We are the assembly, but it means that we're individuals who come together, right? So that the assembly is supposed to be is to kind of get charged up to go out and do what we're supposed to do, right? Salt in the salt shaker doesn't do much, but salt dispersed actually has an effect. Light under a bushel does nothing. Light under a basket does nothing, but light that is quote unquote unleashed and allowed to be light does what it's supposed to do. Maybe we should like move into that transition of light here. Let me go ahead and bring it back up. I'll just read that part again. Verse 14, you are the light of the world. A city located on a hill cannot be hidden. People do not light a lamp and put it under a basket, but instead on a lampstand, and it gives light to all the people in the house. And so that idea is you don't light it and leave it, or you don't light it and hide it. That
It's counterintuitive. If
exactly.
why would you? It's pretty much saying why would you do this? Like so, application. If you are a Christian and you have the Holy Spirit in you, you've experienced Christ, you know who He is, you have the Spirit dwelling in you. Why would you not let that light out? It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to hide it, if you're going to, you're a born again believer and you've accepted Christ, you place your faith in Him, and then now you're going out into life and you're not using that same faith that you have placed in Christ for your eternal salvation, and now you are not using that service of faith, and that you are just going back into the world and you're not letting that light shine. It makes no logical sense. It's not. It's counterintuitive.
I want to put it into a different place. Let's come at it from a different angle. So if I had, let's say I had just an amazing product.
Hmm.
You know, maybe I'm the inventor of ShamWow.
All right.
Wouldn't
That's
that be? I mean, come on, ShamWow is the most amazing product. If I had this amazing product and I didn't let people know,
mm-hmm.
if I instead just said I have this amazing product, I think I'll throw it in the closet and just
Yep.
use it when I need to. First of all, at a certain point, to have something so amazing as a ShamWow and to not share it would be a
Mm-hmm.
travesty. And we, obviously, I'm being facetious in a little bit, in a little sense there, but the idea of having something that is so great that you need to share it and then not is almost seen as a disservice. You could put it into a different realm to say, I have figured out something that's going to help cancer patients, but I don't share it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
What is
that goes back to the parable of the talents too. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
touches on other things, and these principles get expanded on and build on each other. But that idea of having something and not putting it on display. Now, notice it's not saying that you go from house to house and then you have to shove the light into people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's put on display. And it's funny, there's two different things that are here, right? So it talks about the city on a hill that everyone can see.
Mm-hmm.
That is supposed to be a beacon. And so you could imagine, especially at this time where you travel between towns, there's nothing between. Some
Dark.
of
I
us have,
mean, no
yeah,
light pollution. Yep.
or like when Trinity is somehow driving around through the back canyon roads, where there's no lights out in Lancaster or something like that, where there's nothing. All of a sudden, when you see, let's say I used you as an example, Trinity. Hopefully, you're still watching. Uh, if you have that kind of a city where all of a sudden you crest a hill and you look and all of a sudden there's a city there, you go, oh my gosh, now I can get gas, now I can buy my sunflower seeds or whatever it is, whatever you're looking forward to, I can eat something. The city that is on a hill that people can see, to travelers, is the most welcome sight. You're like, oh my goodness, that light in the darkness is the difference between I don't know what I'm going to do and I'm saved. It can literally be that stark.
It's life and death if you think about it. It shows life. Like if you are in darkness, there's darkness always kind of alluded to death. So then you see the light, you see that there's life because you know there's going to be life there, kind of like you're talking about. If you're driving in the canyons, there's nothing going on, and then you see a gas station, you do know there is life there. There's at least someone working there. There is civilization per se. Yeah, it's a great one. It's a great
It,
visual.
so you have that visual, and then you have the personal one, because this is people don't light a lampstand and then put a basket on it. That's a much more personal thing. That this is like, and for us, see, we're so used to artificial light. We are talking about this before we went live. We're so used to artificial light that the blessing of light, if I could put it that way, is almost lost on us because all we have to do is flip a switch. But
Hmm.
think about a power outage. A power outage, all of a sudden, it becomes much more poignant. For us, all of
Hmm.
a sudden, we see what light really means,
Yeah.
right? So have it be 9 o'clock, trying to get your kids to bed, whatever, and all the power goes out. All of a sudden, light is so important. And into that kind of pitch black, or if have you ever gone spelunking,
I have
Matt?
not. No.
Spelunking, so you're going into caves. Um, you're going, all right, Trinity, have a good ride. If you're in these caves, if you have never experienced darkness, then if you go into a cave, I went into something similar. I went spelunking in. I shouldn't have done this. This was dumb. But we went spelunking in the drainage pipes under different parts of LA. Very not smart
Yeah.
because who knows what could flush out there, what's living in there,
Yeah.
because they're dry most of the time. But when it rains, the
Oh yeah.
water has to go somewhere.
Yep.
But spelunking down in there and then crawling through this tube, going up, trying to get out of it. The darkness is so thick, and we did this just to feel the effect. Everybody turns off all their lights. The darkness, it feels like it is enveloping you. It is so dark, and we are used to having lights, especially us modern people. We're used to having artificial lights all the time. So having darkness, think of the power outage. You have that darkness, and all of a sudden someone lights one candle. How much light does that give to the entire room?
Hmm. No,
It's
illuminates. Yeah.
it's less than we're used to, because we'll turn on multiple lights and have the thing just like
Yeah.
blazing, right? The
Hmm.
whole house. But one candle in the darkness, all of a sudden, it is a stark difference. You cannot, and this is, I think, where it lines up with salt. You cannot light a candle or turn on a light and not have it be effective. There's nowhere where there is darkness and you turn on a light and the light does not have its effect. It is used in some fantasy stories and things like that where there's some powerful darkness that's so powerful that it sucks in light, and that is meant to be a scary thing because light is always effective. That is only meant to be ominous, or that can only be ominous if light is always effective. So light in a house, always effective. It can't not be effective. So here you have two examples: salt. You can't add salt without it having an effect, and light. You can't have a light in a house and have it not effective, or city on a hill. It always has its effect,
Now,
right?
here's my question with you. So, because we might actually have different opinions here. When it says about the salt, going back to the salt,
Mm.
about being thrown out, being trampled underfoot, what do you interpret that as?
It's useless, so it gets trampled underfoot.
Yeah, but what's the application like to the believer that's a salt? If a believer is unsalty and they get thrown out, where do you what do you read into that?
I would actually say, going back to the example of salt, then it probably wasn't salt to begin with.
Okay, see, I would
That's
actually.
trampled like everything else, because the point is everything else in the street's trampled.
Mhm.
So then that's just over there.
See, I would actually disagree, which is totally fine with us, right? I would actually disagree with that. I think it's a matter of because they become ineffective and useless, then now they are taken away from their service. I don't think that means that they were never salt to begin with. I think they may have just allowed, just like the salt with impurities, it slowly became salty, then they just taken out of the game. Because if you see with verse 16, in the same way, he says lit your light. So he's like it's saying lit it. He's almost showing you like it's possible that you can have this light in you that doesn't come out. That's why he's telling you, he's commanding you, lit it out, lit it shine. Don't be counterintuitive, don't be useless, lit it shine. It's just how I interpret it, at least I see it as.
Yeah, that might be. I mean, for me personally, that might be taking the example and stretching it a little too far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it literally says like when salt has lost its saltiness, and anyone who's dealt with salt knows there is no such thing as salt that all of a sudden is not salty.
Mm-hmm. But there's plenty of, at least I've noticed, believers that I would say are not being effective as salt would be effective. But the idea of them being thrown into, like, taken out and they were never saved in the first place and were never believers, that would be something that I would actually disagree with. Again, it's just
Well,
something.
that's where I say you're probably stretching it too far.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can get to that from here
Hmm.
necessarily. Like, if you're salty, you're salt. Or I'm sorry, if you're salt, you're salty. If you've lost your saltiness, you're worthless. You get tossed out. That's which I think is more so highlighting the fact that we're talking about the effectiveness. We're talking about effectiveness of the thing, right?
Hmm.
And which is why when you go to light, you can't have light that's not effective. It's like, and if your light stops lighting things, it gets thrown out into the darkness.
No,
Like,
but
it's
then
literally an example that it's impossible,
no,
right?
but I mean, he does say that it could be cut. Don't cover it. It's counterintuitive, obviously. He's showing you,
Correct.
but light can be covered and it can be dwindled to. I mean, it's still there, but it's suppressed. Now, obviously, that's not effective. It's not what he would want. That's why he's telling you, lit the light out. Don't allow that to be suppressed. Lit it out of you. Again, it's
Well,
just something. Yeah.
that's the example that I think you're actually stating.
Hmm.
The light is the example of that.
Yeah.
The salt is the example of there's someone, if you want to put it to those terms, there is someone who said they were salt, they weren't salty, so they got tossed out.
Hmm.
With the light, it's you have light, you are light, you're just hiding it.
Hmm.
So those are two really different examples, but
Yeah.
they're
No,
both used for the same thing, right?
they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're actually saying the same thing.
Hmm. I can see.
So it's just but you can't apply the same thing from the light to the salt and the salt to the light.
Hmm.
But the principle of both of them being effective
Same
are
principle.
useful
Yeah.
to understand that principle in all those different realms.
Hmm.
So
You see that?
yeah.
No,
So going to this, go ahead.
oh no, it's just I love um the light analogy because obviously Christ is the main light. And like you were talking about, and it really resonated with me when you're going through the tunnels in LA and like the darkness, you felt like it was enclosing you. Like it felt like it just this void, this darkness, you can almost feel it.
Yeah, I was getting in
And
my mouth.
yeah, and what it resonated with me, at least when you brought that up, is how terrifying the idea of eternal separation from the creator, because obviously Christ is the light, God is the light source. I mean, yeah, we have electricity, we have lights, but who is the source of that? That is God. He is the source of light, and that's why we are supposed to be the light of the world, because we have his light in us. And the visual of being in eternal separation from God in hell, having that complete darkness in this lake of fire per se, right? I think what hell is alluded to is just so terrifying. And then having that visual, at least in my mind, makes me like want that light inside of me to shine more, to then wake other people up so they don't have that darkness in their they don't spend that eternity in darkness. That is, it is so terrifying. It's one of those things where, as a believer, we really do need to constantly recheck ourselves and refocus and remember what eternity is and what our goal is, per se, in the sense of, it's not a matter of just helping somebody with self-help on this planet. Oh, I'm going to give you good advice on how to, with your job interview, or how to deal with your girlfriend or boyfriend. No, like, yeah, that's also being part of light and salt and helping others. But the main purpose that Jesus told us is to go make it disciples. Go give people give people the gospel, and have them have eternal salvation. It's something that is so critical. And I know that we, as 21st century Christians, especially in America, a lot of us are kind of scared to speak about these subjects, because we will then look like bigots, or we look closed-minded. We're not being open and inclusive. We're not. We're being so uh, dogmatic per se. So then churches then again, when I say churches, I'm saying as a whole. When you turn on the TV and you see the pastor, Joel
Yeah.
Osteen or whatever, they compromise, where then they're just giving them cotton candy, where it's like helpful self-help advice, for the world, but it doesn't sustain eternally. And it's something we Christians need to keep focused on, that, hey, this person that I'm talking to, they are a eternal soul, and they are either going to spend eternity with the most high creator God that we worship and follow, or they're going to spend eternity in this darkness that you were just talking about, in this lake of fire, where they will have memories, they will have a consciousness, they will have eternity to just sit in this darkness. And it is the most terrifying thing. It's too much to actually even contemplate and meditate on, because it is so terrifying. And we just, again, I at least use that as fuel to then look at this verse as application of, I need to let the salt that Christ has given me and the light that Christ is inside of me to shine, to then preserve others from hellfire, to shine light on the darkness, so they are not in darkness for eternity. It is critical. That's Christian 101. We're being a disciple, being a soldier for Christ. That's our goal. Get people to the light of Christ. Now, whether they accept it or not, we can't do that. That's up to God. But we just need to allow that light in us to shine. So then, if they are a traveler and they are searching and they're spiritually thirsty, and they see that light that is shining from us, then they know where to go. They know the path. And we always have to remember that light inside of us. It's not us. It's Christ. It's God's light.
Right. And I would probably use The Lord of the Rings as an example. And a lot of people, if they haven't read the books, have seen the movies. So I'm talking about the original Lord of the Rings. You have the story, which I will admit to this as a Lord of the Rings fan and someone
Mm-hmm.
who loves the story, who really enjoys the movies. When I get to Sam and Frodo's storyline, I will often skip it and go back to the battles. I will admit to that, and I will receive whatever lashings I need to for that. But in that storyline of Sam and Frodo, they are moving farther and farther into darkness.
Yeah.
And as they move farther and farther into darkness, one of the things that you have is you have two individuals who are friends who they become the types of friends to where they have to depend on each other because there's literally nothing else to depend on. And Frodo is given a gift of light. And that gift of light is meant to shine in dark places. And he
Mm-hmm.
finds that opportunity to then shine this light. It's supposed to be the light of a star, right? And
Yeah.
so they shine that. He shines that in
Our
darkness.
place. Yeah.
And when he does that, think of this. He's the one that has it. He shines it. It's effective. It's effective immediately, right? It doesn't have to ramp up, and it's effective immediately. But that light that he has is not from him.
Mm-mm.
He brings it with him.
Mm-hmm. That's a good analogy.
And that I think is a really good example. Now, to anyone else who would see Frodo all of a sudden like have this light there, right? To the spiders, whoever is
Mm-hmm.
watching that
Yeah, the
scene
orcs
unfold,
or whoever.
that light, they would say he is the originator of light. They would follow the light back to the source and say, oh, that Frodo is the originator of that light. But if you asked him, where's that light come from? He would have to be honest and say, it comes from this. It's not from me specifically.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because what this verse, what this story is not telling you is everyone just needs to find their own light inside and shine it out. The point is saying that real salt and real light is effective. False salt is thrown out, tossed out, and you either have light or darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think what happens is people are trying to make salt that's not salt be salt. And people are looking for artificial sources of light to
The
try
artificial
to
source of
apply.
light is a big thing. That's where again you want to go into like Satan coming as an angel of light, the false light, Lucifer
Right.
being the light. Yeah, that goes into a whole other topic. But yeah, there's a huge issue with that, and then people get swayed by that false light that then is deceptive, which is how Satan operates.
Yeah. And so I would say it this way, because I know that there are people who are Christians that'll watch this and then they'll take something from it. People who are not Christians who will watch this to try to what's that. So first, if you're watching this or listening to this and you're not a Christian, just understand that there's more to all of these different things. It's difficult to just take one of these little principles and just to rip that out of the context and then say, look, I've got this thing. I'm going to make big decisions based on this one little isolated thing. So this is a part of a bigger whole. And what we would say is that for a lot of people, they have gone to the church or gone to Christians, and they have the same assessment of them that we would have, which is that person who's saying, look, I'm salt. They're not salty.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, someone's saying, look, I have light. They don't have light. They have darkness. We acknowledge that too. There are a lot of people who are either fakers. They know they don't. They know they're not, and they show it, right? They're trying to show something it's not them.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have people who are deceived. They think they have these things, but they don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, look, we've got everything dialed in and figured out. But what I am saying is that we acknowledge it. We acknowledge there are a lot of people who say, look, come over here for salt, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Look, come over here, have light. They don't have light. We fully acknowledge that. What we're also saying is that Christians, if you are watching this, if you're listening to this, you need to be that. Don't hide it. Don't withhold. You have to be that for other people so they have a good example to point to. Don't only let there be bad examples. You have to be this. And so maybe it starts with this. Maybe you have to, by yourself, in whatever darkness you're in, be the city on the hill. Be the city on the hill first and shine that. Be truthfully who you need to be and show light. Maybe that's where you have to start before someone will come to you for that smaller light in their own home or for the saltiness, right? Maybe that's what you have to be first. So be that and be consistent, because if you're not, you're going to get thrown into the same category as everybody else.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And a great segue from that is to the last verse here for F16 when it says, so that they can see your good. So what is, because back to what is the salt? What is light per se? Like what is the substance of this light and salt? Well, when you look, it talks about, I think I have a different translation, but yours, so that they can see your good deeds, so your good works, and give honor to your Father in heaven. So the salt and light is good works coming forth from you. And people get stuck on these good works. It's not like, don't overthink it. It's not a matter of, oh, you need to go out there and preach on the corner of Jesus and just doing all these crazy, because some people can be doing those good works, but if it's coming from a wrong spot, those works will be burnt up in the fire and on the bema seat. Jesus is going to be like, well, you weren't doing this for the right motives. That wasn't the Spirit. Those are your own mustering up. Good works from the Spirit is a matter of walking in the Spirit constantly, walking in life decisions, life choices, faith choices, where the Spirit is working through you, whether that is patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, love. Those That's what good works is. You being in line and somebody freaking out or something, and you're having patience, and then you see something and you show that light and that salt in that moment because you're allowing the light of Christ to shine through you. You're not mustering it up and, oh, I need to go do this. I need to go show them this. I need that. That's not the right one. That is a sense of, that comes from a sense of your own pride and legalism per se. If you go down that road, don't overthink this light or salt uh, a way of living. The good works that glorify the Father is you just walking with Him, you being a friend of God, you stepping in obedience with Him, following His commandments to the best of your ability. Obviously, you're not going to be perfect, but you just constantly following Him, repenting, where you're changing your mind daily of who you are, what you're going through, and just walking in His light. That's the thing as Christians we need to understand and grasp, that we as Christians are walking in an intimate relationship with Christ. And that is what it means to allow His light to live through us. It's not us mustering something up and forcing these good works. It comes naturally. And that's why when we are talking, when Jesus says that, bear the good fruit, we do not create it. We just produce it because He's producing it in us. And we get so worked up in ourselves. I know I have in my past where I start stressing, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. We start getting kind of the shame or guilt internally. So then you start being super critical of yourself, but that's not helpful. That just distracts you. Just
Yeah.
every day pursue God, put on your armor, walk with Him in obedience, and the blessings will come. And then what we need to understand too, when you're walking in obedience and you're walking with Him, that light shines because He's blessing you, and then it blesses others. Just like if you live in a family and somebody is in sin, then it's like a bomb that goes off. It affects other people. It's collateral damage, But the same way works with blessings. If somebody in your family is walking with the Lord really tight and is really close, those blessings then pour out onto others around them. It's beautiful. So don't overthink this salt and light thing of good works. Just
Yeah.
walk in Christ.
Yeah, you end up being in the splash zone, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I want to highlight this because this is such an important thing, and I'm so glad. And Trinity always does this, right? He always says those things that are. Well, he's the master of the segue.
Mhm.
So I'm not religious at all, but I believe in these principles, and honestly, I wanted to say this because I think if you were to ask, I'll leave it up there. If you were to ask Matt and I if we're religious, we would probably say no.
Mhm.
The way that the word religion or religious is used today, it is not what we would hold to. We would say we're not religious because we are not trying to live out a certain grouping of principles to say that we are good, that we have earned something, that we are something. That's not the point, and that's we can get into the usage of the word religious. That's a lot of times how religion is used. You pick a religion and you live that religion. It's sort of like you pick a sports team and you buy the paraphernalia, you buy the jerseys, and the stats and the thing. That to my uh, understanding of how the word is used today,
Mhm.
say that we're religious, right? And
Yeah.
and that's what you say when you say that. We're not.
No.
What we are trying to do is to say we want to get to the bottom of what truth is and what light is, and what we find we want to share with other people, which is why it happens best around a dinner table. It happens best in a conversation over coffee, or you go and you go play basketball for a bit, and you have this real conversations that really have an effect at the real time. Salt is effective when it's applied to the food, and honestly, that's one of the best analogies because we eat food every day.
Yep.
That is when those things are effective. And so the fact that Trinity, you're pointing out that these are principles to be applied, that is the perfect starting point for this. This is where Jesus is saying, here are these different principles. And what you can do is you can look at it and you can turn around and say, I based on these principles, I know that that's false. That's like first starting point. I can see the real thing, and then when I see the false thing, I can point it out immediately. And that's where we're starting. That's the principle. That's a principle applied. So Maybe I have to put that video out sooner rather than later. But
Yeah, and the best way I've heard about the religion thing is religion is man's attempt of reconciling us back to God. Christ and you know, relationship with Christ is God's way of reconnecting us to Him. So that's because religion is always man's attempt to try to do something. Whether want to do this, man's got to do this. Whatever we have to do, it puts the responsibility back on the individual. And that's what's so beautiful with Christ. And that's why we see Jesus in his ministry. He hated man-made religion. He hated the Pharisees. He hated the Sadducees. He hated the world system that was religion. I mean, as a whole, he
yeah,
was not like back then. He would not be have considered a religious man per se. He was, walking around not being this, looking at least on the outwardly holier than thou and legalistic. So I love that way of looking at it. So you're right. I would not say I'm a religious. People always think, oh, Matt's a religious man. But I don't see myself as a religious man. I see myself as just a follower of the creator my creator. That's
yeah,
how I look at it.
yeah. And that's I think that's a good place to kind of to land this, because honestly, these chapters where Jesus is preaching this sermon and has these small little nuggets that go through, there are most people would sit down and say, I agree with most of this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they would say, let's talk about some of the particulars, but these principles, I agree with these principles, and it's true. You know what? Because truth resonates.
Yep, it
It
does.
resonates all, and I'm not one of those kinds of people who would say that you can't look out into the world and find some of these same principles. I think that what Jesus is preaching, it is specific, but it's something that resonates. There's a phrase that I heard. A lot of people will, or a lot of Christians will say, was a Jew, and so he lived and did Jewish things, and this is a Jewish thing. In fact, they called Christianity the cult of the Nazarene in the beginning. It's just one of those Jewish offshoot cults. But Christianity, Jesus was also the savior of the Gentiles. It says that all of the Gentile stories, which is why I think myth is so important to understand. Myth shows what people are thinking and feeling and the stories that they hold important. Jesus fulfills those as well. Jesus is the better Hercules.
Yep.
Jesus
Well,
is the better Prometheus, if you want to put it in some of those things. Like whoever's putting their faith in some of those things, you watch the gods fail. Jesus does it better.
well, what's awesome to you bringing up about the people calling him the cult of the Nazarene. Well, who was Paul's teacher, the rabbi?
Gamaliel.
Yeah, wasn't it him that said was it Acts or was it Acts or Luke where he's talking to the Pharisees of, hey, let's see what happens with this Jesus of Nazareth, because at that time there was many false messiahs or cult leaders that would grow up and then they would just dwindle because they weren't the truth. And he's like, hey, if this is if this is not God, then just let it be and it'll dwindle out. But if it is, then we are going against God.
Right.
And I love that
We're saying, like,
because
we're not sure yet.
yeah,
Let's see where this goes, because we might be going against God.
yeah, because so many people think of Jesus as this, oh, he's just a cult leader. Then he has gained traction for some reason, but people don't understand. There's been thousands of these cult leaders that got groups of people that then kind of, I mean, you see it today. You see cult, they go out into the desert and they get like a following of, a couple hundred or 1,000, and they drink Kool-Aid and die or whatever, but then they dwindle. They never catch
Right.
traction. But
Yeah.
Jesus, you have 2 billion people, right? It grew. So I love that way. So just branching
Yeah.
off of what you said.
And I love, I'll read Bushido. I'll read Japanese philosophy, and I'll read some of those points to say, my gosh, look at this. Look how dead on they are at recognizing what a truth is.
Yep.
But even they would say, but they don't have
The source.
the whole of it. They don't
Yeah.
have all of it, because I do think, and going back to Trinity's point, is that these are principles to be found. This is why so many people who would not say that Jesus is God, who would not trust in Jesus, they look at some of these principles and say, I can't deny that these principles
Mm-hmm.
are true and are beautiful.
Yep.
And I think that's where we have a really great place to have so many good conversations, but some of us get so hung up in the details. I'd love, and you know what, let's start to land the plane here. If anyone is watching this, even if you look at the date and it's months or even years later, who knows what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're watching this and you say, I want to know more of those things, I would love to have a really great conversation. Let's talk about some of these different things. Let's talk about things that we can see as true, and we'll start from there. And I'm sure we're going to have just an amazing, encouraging conversation, which is
Absolutely. I love
what we
that.
love to have. So,
100%.
any final thoughts before we land the plane?
No, I think it pretty much I mean, for such a short little section, it's pretty much going as far as we can really, dive in as much as possible. I think
Yeah.
we hit all the points. Let the light shine. Don't be useless as if you're a follower of Christ. If you're not a follower of Christ, like you're bringing up these fundamental truths. I just ask you to just keep seeking. If you agree with the
Yeah.
principles, just keep looking. Because where do these principles come from? Why does that resonate, like you're talking about, with different religions and different people across the world, where these are fundamental truths, but they won't say that they have the full grasp or the full picture, but they do understand and see these truths. So just keep pursuing, keep seeking. And that's the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about what the light symbolizes. If you're a traveler and you see this light, you are then pursuing that light. It is a journey. You're walking. So just keep searching and keep following that light.
Yeah. And I would say be effective in whatever conversation, whatever situation you find yourself. Be salt, be effective, be impactful, be light,
Yep.
be something that can't be unseen or ignored,
Yep.
but be effectual.
And
That's
know
where I would
another
say.
another thing I want to add to the salt. Understand that salt stings a little bit.
You
So
can.
because people are afraid, especially nowadays, to then be to offend. But guess what? The truth offends, man. Like if I wear tight pants and my butt looks big, and I ask somebody, does my butt look big? And if it's objectively true, they gotta tell me it's true, even if it hurts my feelings or not, right? It's whether it doesn't mean they have to tell me that, but that's the truth. So the idea that truth is offensive, so if you're going to be truthful to people, it's going to offend people in certain ways. It's your approach. Obviously you don't want to be hateful. You come at it with love, but if you tell somebody the truth and it is going to sting them, just like salt stings, it's a cleanser, right? If you have a wound, you put salt in it, it's going to hurt, but it is for the overall good. So if you tell someone that is living in a sinful life and you go tell them out of love the truth, it's going to sting them. It's going to be salt on their wound, but you need to do it. You have to be that salt.
Yeah, if everyone did that and did that effectively, we would not have the most entertaining episodes of American Idol,
Not at
because
all.
that's just
No.
full of a whole bunch of people just not being told you
Yep.
should not sing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
on that note,
Yep.
I think we'll sign off, and we'll see we'll see you
Absolutely.
next time. Thank you all for watching, and
God bless.
Pilgrim on, my friends. We'll see you out there.
Absolutely. God bless.